Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today with Brenda McCabe. And Brenda is the CEO of Next Act Advisors. She is a very experienced board of directors professional who has helped a number of different companies. She's an advisor. She is also an investor. And I'm just really looking forward to having a conversation with Brenda and have her share her story and what she looks for in companies and how she can best help companies with her investing. So Brenda, it's a pleasure to have you today. And I'd like to start out just, you have kind of a fascinating background. You have done so many different things. You have lived different spots around the world. So share with the people that are watching this, the startups in particular, what got you started? Talk a little bit about your background and the journey that led you to the place now where you are actually investing in early stage startups.
Thank you, Jerry. It's quite an opportunity to talk to potential companies that our fund will be investing in. I am based in Los Angeles, originally from the Midwest, but I moved at a very young age after college to Spain. Background, I'm bilingual in Spanish, and I have a background as an auditor in my early days, which is very good when I help you with your financial statements. I then was a controller and worked as a consultant at McKinsey and Company, where I did a lot of M&A in consumer packaged goods and retail. After 16 years with McKinsey, did some private equity, participated in a couple companies that were private equity owned, turned them around, and then I joined AstraZeneca as VP of strategy, where I brought in a lot of consumer goods and retail marketing practices to the pharma experience, consumer-oriented, patient-oriented. And about that time, Jerry, is when I got my first opportunity to serve on a corporate board. I was on a public company pharmaceutical board in the Spanish capital markets, and really at an early age started to understand the value that having good corporate governance enhances shareholders' value. Independent board directors, so I've been an independent board director since 2012 on private and public companies, allows you to represent the shareholders largely when you're independent minority shareholders. So really getting a grip on what is good corporate governance as opposed to bad corporate governance is one of my lifetime professional skills that I bring to startups. My journey as an investor also started, about same time, 2013. I wrote my first check. I left the pharma world and worked in clean tech, solar, ran the Mediterranean for a US technology company, raised about $175 million. So I started to understand what, it's very capital intensive, we had equipment, but what investors that write really big checks are looking at. I was an executive at that time. I had a side business working with software engineers, raising money. And I wrote my first check to a founder that was looking at storage technology so battery storage to provide solidness to the intermittency of solar electricity. And I continued to sit on corporate boards and came back to the United States, settled in the Los Angeles area, where I set up Next Act Advisors. I continue to work and invest in 3 types of sectors. I call them deep tech. They're very large sectors that I feel very comfortable and I'm knowledgeable, and my networks at McKinsey Company and the University of Chicago Graduate School, where I got my MBA 20 years ago, is kind of my secret sauce. I bring a lot of knowledge to people. The 3 sectors that I like to invest in: clean tech, digital health, and enterprise SaaS. So data and actually selling into large corporates, enterprises. Because I've worked in large corporations, McKinsey Company, AstraZeneca, I oftentimes was the buyer of these services. So I understand the decision-making that's made for oftentimes long lead times in your sales process. And I enjoy also working with women-led companies, and was very excited to recently be asked to join an initiative sponsored by the Thai SoCal chapter and global, which is to promote women-led companies, a fund that's going to be earmarked for the women-led companies, as well as have deal flow with other VCs and angel groups in the SoCal region, as well as a global competition for women-led companies that's going to be kicking off soon.
And that we're excited to, as far as Thai SoCal, I didn't put that into the introduction there, which I failed to do, but I'm glad, we would have brought that up, but I know that we're excited to have you, Thai SoCal, having you on board is helping co-chair our the Thai Women Initiative, and a lot of exciting things that are going to be announced and moving forward with that. But I know your passion of helping women founders, it fits in well with helping lead the women's fund that we're going to be launching. So that's exciting for the women founders who are going to be watching this interview as well. You mentioned those three verticals, sectors that you're interested in as far as your personal investing. Talk a little bit about what stage those companies would look like. Is there a sweet spot or a certain stage or place that those companies need to be for you to take a look and strongly consider them?
Yeah, that's great questions. Again, these are very large markets, very regulated. So I do like to see kind of growth, or at least some traction in revenue. It might be grant-based, all right? In digital health and medtech, I always look that the founders have either received funds at the National Institutes of Health, so SBIR funding. It's non-dilutive. It also provides credence to the business proposition that you have been validated by an independent third party. So I would say growth stage, some traction, either through non-dilutive funding and some sales. I want a minimum viable product. Again, big sectors, you're going to pivot. So the way you get to revenue and will evolve over time. So I look for also founders that have the ability to think big and differently. It might just not be a device, but it might be the device plus a service added on top, subscription service. It might be a B2B play initially, selling it to physician offices, or clean tech, you might be selling into a utility. But you can also have a B2C play, all right? So the possibilities of different revenue streams is another angle that I particularly look for in early stage companies.
And correct me if I'm wrong, especially in speaking about the grants and the non-dilutive funding. And as you know, I have a background in the nonprofit sector, but when the companies do receive those grants, another benefit is that they are beholden to show impact and outcome in regards to receiving that grant money, which lends a lot of credibility and
Absolutely.
So it shows that they have to be kind of beholden and responsible towards receiving that money as far as what the government holds them to when they receive those grants.
Yes, it is a criteria that I think more it legitimizes that the MVP that they're working on has a clear consumer need. Maybe it's a patient need. And there's an unmet need in the market that government funding will bring in to cross the chasm, right? Sure.
And so what we've learned from you so far is that you do your own individual investing into companies. You shared a little bit about those verticals that you're interested in. We know you're involved with Thai SoCal, and I believe that you are also invested in the Thai SoCal Angel Fund too. which
Okay.
was which just has launched, and right now I believe it's around $2.7 million that we're going to be dispersing to hopefully around 20-ish type of companies over the next year. And so you're involved with that fund as well. So you have kind of a
seat at the table.
Yeah, seat at the table as far as the companies that present themselves to TIE SoCal. When you look at startups, we talked about verticals. You know, there's so many different things that we look at when we look at startups to invest in. What are some of the key components you look at, like when it comes down to the pitch? When a company gives the pitch, they're going, you know, you're going through the deck. What are some of the most important factors that you look at? You talked about, you know, that traction portion of it, but what are some of the other key components that you look at when you're looking and considering a startup?
Yeah, you know, the kind of the seat at the table that I've been playing in this second angel fund, I will tell you, is I've been tasked to really have a point of view on enterprise SaaS and data companies, as well as digital health, biotech, where I do sit on a board in the vaccine space. So independent of those two verticals, for a pitch session that lasts around 10 minutes, I look for size of the market, right? Because we're so pre-seed, you do want larger markets, right? So your TAM, because you will pivot. So, and the thought process by which the founder or the founding team has reached that TAM. The founding team is very important, skin in the game. Have they worked together before? And what type of environments? And the go-to-market strategy. Those are the three critical things that provides, again, credence to a person that's going to be writing a check or from the fund on, you know, I'm going to bet on this horse, right? I'm not betting on the horse, I'm betting on the jockey or the team that can take this minimal viable product into this very large market with different revenue paths.
Super. And you mentioned SaaS, and I know you have a really strong background in dealing with SaaS. So I'm glad you brought that up, and you know that's relevant to it. What specifically you visited about the founders as far as, you know, have they worked together and that? What when you consider the founders of a company, so many startups that we see, especially now, have such young founders where they don't have that experience behind them. What do you look for then when those startups may have that really incredible horse and they may be really sharp founders, but they don't necessarily have all of that experience yet? And this question is kind of coming from, I visited with a young founder at USC yesterday who kind of posed that question to me. She says, you know, what do I do? Do I just blow off pursuing this great idea and startup until I get more experience working for somebody else? So I'm kind of curious, you know, especially because she was a young woman founder, you know, what would be your position and take on that as far as a founder goes?
Well, it's a great question, and it leads into a lot of the work I do at Next Act Advisors. But the fact that the founder has awareness that they don't have the full toolkit, right? They have some blind spots. That's a very good sign that they're coachable, and they're willing to bring in. There's all types of advisory services or fractional positions, but more importantly, most founders don't think of this. Use your networks, your graduate school or your undergraduate school, people that you went to high school. Look at your LinkedIn, just really network, and you, with your personal relationships, talk about what you're doing, and you will be always pleasantly surprised how people open up their Rolodexes and say, you know what, I know somebody that's doing this, or hey, I know that you might be looking for a co-founder, and what better co-founder than someone that comes from your personal network. So many people think I've got to be in some trade association, or I have to, you know, follow the the advisors that my investor group is providing. No, I mean, think about your own personal networks. Myself, having worked so many years at McKinsey Company and the University of Chicago, that's my go-to. And you always one phone call or one email away from these people that know you well and would want to support you in your endeavors.
And it works on both sides, both the founder, and I'm smiling because kind of you said exactly what I kind of shared with her. It's that network, those connections, and utilizing the people you know. But it works both sides, from the investor and the founder using the networks, because, as you know, I work doing business development for Vidosh, which is a small venture capital firm. And I know that the managing partner of Vishal with that, Kellogg, is his network that he works heavily with because he graduated from Kellogg. So he constantly reaches out to those connections from his past schooling. So that I'm glad you touched upon that, because that it's an important network to utilize, throughout your business career. It just doesn't end when school ends. You utilize that moving forward for years to come. Going back to your actual investment interest in your personal investing, one thing I didn't ask, and what are typically what range of size of checks do you end up writing for startups? Is there a certain range or that you look at investing in?
I'm a small investor, so typically 25,000.
Okay, good to know. It's good for the startups watching us to know that that's where you come on board, and that's important. So is there specific, going back to the founder thing, because I know team is so important for most investors, because they want to work with somebody who's easy to work with or pleasant to work with, or who's coachable. We hear a lot. And I know there's founders who are coachable and there are founders who are not so coachable. But what are some of the personality traits that you look for in a founder when you're assessing them?
Wow.
I love asking these kind of questions. It's all subjective.
Those that I've written text to, or those that I've worked with in my advisory services. First of all, it's an honor to work with early stage founders. Actually, across age is no barrier. I work with founders that are like 45. Others are 28. So age is I'm kind of age blind, and it's very interesting because I do consider it an honor. I learn a lot, particularly about the buying process, because a lot of these founders are millennials or Gen Xers. All right, it's a totally different experience for me, because I'm a boomer. All right.
I am as well. I understand.
So it's an honor to work with them. Now, coachable is an absolute slam dunk for me. That founding team has to be willing to listen and ask and listen, but be able to answer questions. One of my core skills is I'm a very good questioner. As you made in the comments in the introduction, I've worked in a lot of industries and large corporations, private equity. I've seen a lot of deals. I've actually been in a lot of M&A transactions. So I've been around the block. I'll ask a lot of questions. Also, I ask questions with respect to not only the product, for the market. I like to see in founders their, intellectual curiosity and their in the willingness to explore. Again, these revenue discovery paths, to be open, and not just enamored with their solution. You have to be exploratory. And I guess the other element that is very unique in how I work, or look, or the attributes I look in a founding team, is they have to believe in the business side, right? I work at deep tech, so it's a lot of engineering, a lot of science, pardon me, physicians, PhDs, they oftentimes don't know what they don't know. And the business side, pretty early on, is it's critical to have basic NDAs and your IP strategy. You need to think about protecting those crown jewels. Investors look for that. So I like to work with, I look for founders that have thought about the business side. They don't need to have the answers, but they need to think about, they're creating an enterprise. It's not a lifestyle project. It's not a PhD program. It is an enterprise. It's going to have shareholders. Eventually it's going to be sold or listed on a market. And the ultimate owners are the shareholders, right? So you're building this entity that needs to be responsible with the funds that are given to the company. So business sense is something that I look for in founders.
Great. I'm going to throw a curveball at you here. I'm going to ask a fun question. And that question would be, looking back on when you started investing in companies, is there a company that you looked at and didn't invest in that you kind of regret going, wow, I wish I would have invested in that company?
That is a curveball. I have to say, I'm choosy, so I have no regrets to date.
Okay.
But that's a good question to keep in the back of my mind. As again, participating in Fund 2, we have a monthly screening call, so I'm seeing many more companies now. So, yeah.
And that brought up something too, because between your personal investing and now being involved with the Thai SoCal Fund, which is another decision-making process you have. But one thing that's important too for those startups watching, you work with the fund, you're part of the team and have a seat at the table for the Thai SoCal Fund, but also you have the option, even if the fund isn't interested in the company, that you're able to even come in and do a sidecar or a SPV deal with some of the other angel investors that may be interested in a particular company. So there's always those options as well. But I was just curious in your own investing if there had been a company that maybe you passed up on that, because I hear stories all the time from various investors going, yeah, there was that one company that I wished, I would have invested in, whether it be, an Uber or whatever. I've talked to investors. It's just amazing some of the stories where people go, yeah, I kind of kicked myself on that one, but always fun to see what opportunities people have had. And we always, it's all subjective anyway, as far as different investors have different things they look at, and timing has a lot to do with it. But I appreciate I'm glad that you haven't had one yet that you've kind of go, well, shoot, I wish I would have done that. But I don't like to live with regrets myself. So I always look back and go, hey, it wasn't meant to be. If it didn't happen, that's okay.
Well, I will say I had written a check, this is back in Europe, and had an exclusive agreement based on a technology transfer. And we had it in exclusivity. We'd actually set up an LLC to acquire the technology transfer, but it was based upon the legitimate right to own the IP. And come what may, one of the authors of the patent actually gave the patent to another university. So there was a patent dispute. So I'm thankful that I had this legal document, gave us exclusivity for 1 year, but it was based on, so it was like an option. And fortunately we did not buy that because it was based on that. So again, good corporate governance, having some, some guardrails around where your money is allocated. And now I continue to look at this space. It was in battery storage, and I'm back in to another company. So yeah.
Super. Well, I've been as I've gotten to know you here over the last few months, it's impressive that you've got an incredible background and knowledge and insight into, the areas especially that you specialize in and that are an expert as far as I'm concerned in. Going to kind of wrap it up by asking, if a startup is watching this and they go, we fit into, the type of startup that you're looking for, what's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I have my LinkedIn profile, it's Brenda McCabe. And also my email is Brenda@NextActAdvisors. And you can reach me either through LinkedIn or direct email.
Okay, and we'll have that information that you'll probably be seeing it on the bottom of the video when you're watching that, so that information will be available. So the last question is, when those startups do reach out to you, what do you look for? What's their best way, quick way through a LinkedIn or an email to capture your attention?
What is the best way?
What's the best way that whether it's something that they write in that email, what's something that really you look for that will set a startup apart when they first reach out to you?
It's interesting you asked that, because if you look at my website, NextAct Advisors, I have an intake form. It's not mandatory, but if you want me to take a look at your business, I ask 3 questions. What was the business or CEO that inspired you to create your business? The second question is how you spend your time. And the third is, would you be willing to allow me to see an email or a letter that you sent to somebody giving them thanks for the role they've had in your life, either professionally or personally? With that is my litmus test of people I like to work with.
That is absolutely fantastic.
I didn't actually set you up to ask that question, but it is my
you did. That's a question I like to ask at the end, at the end of our conversation. So, because something needs to set that startup founder apart from, I'm sure you get inundated with pitch decks and emails and communicate and that. So I love that. That's just a great way to set apart the startup founders as you're first initially being introduced to them. So I really like that. That more investors should have something like that when they're getting that information, to come up with really questions like that are going to help you see in depth a little bit more about that founder. So Brenda, thank you for your time. I know you're extremely busy, so I do appreciate the time you've taken. I often say that time is one of the most underappreciated and undervalued gifts that we can give someone. And so, thank you for taking the time and sharing your story and your interest in helping these startup founders. So look forward to further conversations with you, and best wishes to your investing, and look forward to working with you in regards to the Thai SoCal Fund, the Thai Women's Initiative, and thank you again for your time.